Hello, and welcome to the Wanderings podcast, a photographer's exploration of art, science, and world culture. I am your host, Pedro Bonatto, a fine art and advertising photographer based in Toronto, Canada. In this show, I talk to artists, designers, scientists, filmmakers, authors, entrepreneurs, people who are creating inspiring work in a variety of fields. I have been working as a professional photographer and as a musician for a few years, and I'm often inspired by history, science, mythology, and popular culture in the photographs that I create. In this podcast, I try to go a little bit deeper in the stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. Before we get into today's show, I wanted to take a moment and thank you for listening to the podcast. It really means the world to me. We are on our third episode, and I'm really enjoying these conversations. And we have a great lineup for the next few months. I would love to hear from you, what you're thinking about the show, your takeaways from our guests, or just to say hi. You can find me on social media at Pedro Bonatto and hit me up with your questions, comments, and suggestions. Today's episode is a very special one for me. Although I am a photographer and a musician, my first love in art was comic books. I learned how to read with my mom reading comic books before bed, and I would follow the panels and try to figure out the words. My dad used to show me some of the heroes he liked when he was a kid, and I had a chance to pass that love to my oldest nephew when I gave him some of my favorite graphic novels from my own collection. I used to love drawing characters and worlds, and the photos I take today are certainly inspired by that art form. Even if you're not into comics, I think you'll love this episode. To guide us into this fantastic world of comic book art, our guest is Mike Deodato. Mike is one of Marvel's most prolific artists working today and probably one of the top 5 creative pencilers in the market. We talked about his beginnings in comics with his dad, how he developed his unique style by taking inspiration from artists from all over the world. We talked about how it took 10 years working on comics in Brazil before he became an overnight success in the American market. Mike also describes his techniques, how he taught himself how to draw, how he went from paper to digital drawing, his process of breaking down a story, and his advice on getting into comics. He also talked about how he organizes his studio, his love for karate, maintaining a healthy lifestyle as an artist, and how even a world-class artist has to fight for the time to create independent projects to keep his creativity on the edge. Unbeknownst to him, Mike was very important on my own journey towards a photography career, and I shared that story during this interview. Okay, this was a long intro. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Mike Deodato. Okay, so Mike Deodato, welcome to the Wanderings podcast. How are you doing?
Doing good, thank you.
Yeah, it's funny for 2 Brazilian guys to be speaking in English, but we'll since the audience for the podcast is of English-speaking people, we thought it would be cool for them to see our Brazilian accents from the north and from the south.
My English sucks, but if necessary, you can put subtitles. So.
Yeah. We'll do subtitles in audio. Sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. To start off, like right off the bat, I am really inspired by your artworks. I have one of the drawings you made for me when you last came to Toronto a few years ago. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is, so how did it all started? How did you start creating comic books?
Well, I was inspired by my dad. He created the first comic book in my region in Brazil in 1963. So I grew up watching him drawing, and he also introduced me. He was a fan of comics too, so he introduced me to the masters of the art, like Al Foster. Introduced me, not the real guy, but the books, their
comic books, yeah.
Yeah. Differently from most of the stories you hear from comic book artists, I had total support from my parents, especially my dad.
Mhm.
so much that we spent about 10 years working together. Like he was writing and I was drawing. So it was great. My first job that I consider like a professional one, that I was paid for it, was in
Mhm.
1985 when I did the story of my state in comics. Paraíba is the name of my state. It was 1985, but I only could live from comics, just from comics. It was 1991 when I started doing comics for United States.
Right.
Before that, I had about three other jobs, and I did my comics in the weekends. It
Oh.
was
Mhm.
more like a hobby.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. I knew you started like working with U.S. clients in 1991, but I didn't know about that before. So basically, you are self-taught in drawing. Like you would just. How was your process of like learning in the beginning?
Basically, everything I know about drawing comics, I learned by copying from the comics I read, that I collected. And even my dad, he never gave me formal lessons of drawing or anything. We didn't have money for to go to a school or anything like that. But my dad had a different way of writing comics. He would write them in thumbnails, in
Hmm.
small drawings. He would draw very small the panels with the balloons already there.
Oh. Hmm.
So in a sheet of paper, he would put 4 pages, and
Hmm.
just by looking at it and by translating into a bigger page, I would learn how to do storytelling
Oh.
just by following his lead. So it was. I didn't have any lessons, but I learned by watching him work.
That's fantastic. Wow, I didn't know that. That's great. It's probably very interesting for you to see your dad like working from this like macro perspective, right? To see how one page would go into another, or how one panel would go into the other, like as a whole process as you were learning, right?
Yeah,
So then you would do them just like the penciling, or you would with him would you do the whole process? Like would you color and do like the balloons with the lettering? What's the process there?
yeah, I would do the whole process. That's the good thing about you doing independent comics and doing fanzines, because you have to do the whole process, even the colors. And the good side is because it's a lot of work, but you learn everything about the process. So when I finally started doing comics for America, I knew everything already. So I was ready already. Another good thing about doing independent comics is because you have the feedback from the readers, and you grow with their responses, and it's great for you to develop. I know that sometimes an artist gets a big chance and started immediately drawing for a big company, but it's good. But at the same time, I don't think it's good for his growing as an artist.
Right.
I think it's good to suffer a bit.
No, for sure. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And so you started with learning with your dad. Then you got a few jobs locally, and then you got approached to work with some clients in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, it was created agency in Brazil called Art and Comics around 1990, and I had a I was not that famous, but people know my name for doing comics for Brazil, and they called me and asked me if I wanted to do something for a company called Malibu, and it was I guess it was 30 pages. I had 30 days to deliver it, and I was working in three in three jobs in two newspapers in one advertising agency, and it was crazy, but I managed to meet the deadline.
Oh,
So
wow.
after that, I never stopped getting work. It was yeah, it never stopped.
That's great. I read somewhere that your favorite, at least when you were growing up, your favorite character was Spider-Man. Is that it?
Yeah, it changes weekly.
Right. So,
Actually, my favorite was Captain
mhm.
America because of the shield.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very very profound. It's because of the shield. But I prefer the more savage ones like Wolverine,
Right.
Conan.
Hmm.
I like better the anti-heroes than the heroes.
Right.
But what I like about Captain America is because it's very straightforward, very honest, and almost naive.
Hmm.
And I like all of that. But I also like the anti-heroes, the very dangerous one that make bad decisions and but try to help. Wolverine, basically.
Right. Yeah, Wolverine and Spider-Man are my favorites when I was growing up, and I actually learned how to read with Spider-Man comics when I was like, I don't know, 5 or 6. Cool. So from there, then you started working a lot with Marvel specifically, right?
Well, yeah, I started with the small companies, but then I heard that the DC was in need of an artist for Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
I did a couple of samples, sent it, and people loved it. And then I spent a year drawing Wonder Woman, and then I became a overnight success. Although I was working on comics for more than 10 years,
Right.
and people start to fight about my wanted to work with me. So at some point, Valiant and Marvel were offering big contracts. So I decided for Marvel because I grew up reading their characters. So it was 1995,
Oh, wow.
and I have been there since then, except for 2 years. I guess it was 1999 and 2000. I did something for DC, but since then it's all Marvel.
Yeah, that's cool. And then, like, walk us through, like, how is your day to day on when you're drawing? Like, walk us through the process. You receive a script from via email, I assume these days, and then you start working on the panels and working on the comic books. How does that work?
Yeah, I like to when I receive the script via email, I like to read it as a whole, so I can feel the story and to get excited for the story. Then I ask for references. I ask my editor, I need reference for this character, a lot of characters, and then I start I'm reading the script. I also do little thumbnails in the pages with the disposition of the panels, so I can have an idea of how it would work. And then after that, I start doing page per page, and then I do the layout with the idea, all the energy I put in the layout. Usually I choose the most important scene to be the bigger one when it's all when they all are all important. So I keep it straight with classic paneling, and then I look for references. Sometimes I take picture of myself, of my friends, my wife as references. I look for reference in the 3D models. Like if I need a boat, I go to the internet and look for a model.
Google Warehouse.
Yeah, Google
Hmm.
Warehouse. Yes, I like
Hmm.
that because I have all the views of the object I want to draw. It make it easier. And then after I have all the reference, I put them together in a bigger page, and usually I use Photoshop for that.
Hmm.
And then after everything is assembled, then I start to really draw. I prefer to draw nowadays. I draw everything digital,
Hmm.
but to draw I prefer the instead of the big digital table. I prefer the smaller one because it feels more like I'm drawing in a page. Because it's I don't like much large space. I like to assemble things, but to draw, I prefer it to keep it closer to me. So I use a companion to draw.
Oh, interesting. So that's like a screen, but it's a bit smaller, and then you can draw on it.
Yeah, they have a bigger one at 27 inch, and I have this little one. I guess it's 13 inch.
Hmm.
And I use also for drawing instead of Photoshop. I use Clip Studio Paint, also known as Manga Studio,
Hmm.
because is made for comics. And I like the brushes are very sensitive,
Hmm.
and and that's it. Basically, that's what I do. And then after I finish, I sent the page immediately, and I started another one. Back in the days, I used to send 5 pages a week, but nowadays I prefer to send a page a day. I finish the page, I send the page.
Oh, okay. So the writer sends you, or I imagine you have like an editor being the intermediate in the process. Do you work directly with the writer, or is it someone at Marvel that that oversees the whole process? How does that work?
Yeah, usually I communicate via email. So there is a chain of emails. Everybody involved is copied there, like my editor, and then the editor, assistant editor, the writer, and me, and I also put my colorist too. And that is also Brazilian, Frank Martin.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then everybody is up to date, and if I have any doubt, I'll just ask everybody at once.
Hmm. Yeah, the cool thing is that you can work remotely, basically, right? You can be at your house. I know that we were going to talk about your working space, but I know that you live very close to the beach, and you can you were able to develop this like lifestyle that you're able to stay in Brazil at your home and not have to be in the US or some other place, right?
Yeah, that internet was great for that, because I can work from home, and my studio is built in a way that I share half of it with my little daughter,
Mm.
so I can watch her, and then I can also she takes care of my blood circulation, because every 10 minutes, Dad, come to see that. So good for my health.
For sure.
And because I worked, I guess, 10 years in offices in newspapers, and I hated it. I was doing something I didn't like, but I had to.
Mhm.
And I always dreamt about working at home doing comics, and so every day I I say thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. I remember when we met a few years ago, we were talking about this and about the lifestyle. And so, how is your workspace? So you have, I assume, like this a big, I guess, screen tablet, and then you have the small one. Do you still do any work with paper, or is that more of just for fans, or just for fun, or how is your relationship with paper and digital in your studio?
Well, I have this new studio that I built last year. It was made for me to reunite with my family here, because I used to have a small one that didn't fit everybody. So I was every time I had visitors, I had to draw, and I was cast away from everybody.
Hmm.
So now they can come here and sit in a big sofa and watch TV while I'm working the half of the studio in the back, and that's it. Nowadays I work mostly digital.
Hmm.
The only time I draw in paper is when I go to conventions.
Hmm.
2 weeks ago, my friend Will Conrad came here to my other daughter's wedding,
Hmm.
and I had this idea to invite every friend artist of mine to draw in my cabinets where I put my books, so in the doors. So he did this drawing of Superman. I did another one of Conan in the upper part. So it's very rare for me to draw in paper or any other thing besides digital. And that it's because for me, financially speaking, it would be better to draw in paper because it would be another source of money to sell the original.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I love technology.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me faster. I like to use the extra time to pay attention to my family, to exercise, to do other things that will result in me becoming happier, and it will reflect on my art. So it was a calculated move to do that. In the end, it's the same thing. I'm drawing using a pen and drawing in a surface of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So that, yeah, so it's the same, but it's faster. And I like to draw and that to be online at the same time and talk to my friends, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's I don't see any problem except for there is no physical original to sell, but I can make a good living
For sure.
without it. So
Yeah, and it makes you like a prolific artist, right? You are always working on a lot of new projects, and I guess one page a day is very good. Do you always get, if you send this page, for example, to all the people that are involved? Do you get notes back? Do you have to change things, or whatever you send? Usually, it's already ready to for color.
yeah, we usually I think 99% of the times I get a compliment. Everybody, hey, it's good, fantastic. And once in a while, there is some problem because there is I do layouts nowadays, but just for myself. They are very loose, just for me to understand what's going on, and I immediately start to drawing over it. In the past, I used to make them more accurate to send to my editor. He would approve, and then I would do the inks. But there was a time, I think it was Dark Avengers were late for some reason, not my reason, and I asked, can I send the pages directly without layouts so we can get more time? And yes, of course. And I never sent another layout in my life. And then I take the risk. So I send the pages. I didn't send the layout. So sometimes something it was not. I didn't understand something in the script, or sometimes it's a mistake by the editorial. They didn't know that, I don't know, Asgard were destroyed, so I had to have to draw another thing, or whatever. It happens, and I change it when it's my fault because I'm not sending layouts. I don't complain at all. I just do another one, but it's very rare
Mm-hmm.
because I'm old. I know how to do that. So it's very rare for me to make a mistake, and I don't have time to make a mistake.
Right, right. What I hear a lot of artists, whenever I talk to people that are in the beginning of their trajectory, let's say, what happens is that sometimes they don't have a volume of work, right? They're like waiting for the inspiration to come or not really practicing. And when you're a professional, you show up, you do it, and you do it again, and tomorrow you'll do it. And I think that creates a different kind of artist, right? That you can, since you've been doing it for a while, you see your style evolving, and you know you have deadlines you have to deliver. It's as much as art as a business, a way to like sustain your family. Can you talk a little bit about that, like from the difference between being like just an amateur wanting to like breaking into comics or any other art form, or the professional that shows up? Like that's the impression I get from your work ethic.
Yeah, when you are working independently, usually you are still working from your parents' house, so you don't have to worry about pay rent or anything. So it's everything is fun. You wait for inspiration, but when you become a professional, you have to deliver on time, and you have to adapt. It's comics. You have to produce at least 20 pages a month plus a cover. That's the minimum they require for you. from you. So you have to work in this. You have to do the best you can in this under these um,
Guidelines. Yeah.
guidelines. Yeah, it's like you working for a movie. You have a year to 2 years to make a movie. If you are working on a soap opera, you have to do I don't know
Like a
a
few months,
chapter,
probably. Yeah.
yeah, a chapter a day, or and you have to do a masterpiece of that.
Right.
You have to adapt, or if you don't cannot adapt, you have to choose another media to express yourself. Of course, I would love to have 1 year to produce an album like Europeans do. It's sounds like a dream, but I have bills to pay, so I have to think about. But for example, I realized that I'll never have the time to do my independent comic if I don't push myself more than I already push. So I'm working on a independent comic with I cannot give details of a friend of mine, a writer friend of mine, and in order to do that, uh, I usually do 5 pages a week for Marvel, and I thought I have to do two more for myself. So every week I have to produce 2 pages of my own comic. It's 105 pages. I have done 53 pages so far,
Oh, wow.
and it's hard, but that's the only way that because I don't want to leave Marvel. I feel comfortable there. They treat me well. They pay my bills. So every time I think of doing something else, they come with a very good offer, and if I refuse, my wife would kill me. So it's a great place to be. Just but in order to do my own material, I have to push myself. So that's what I'm doing. I have been doing the last 5 months.
Oh, wow, cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to whenever this is ready for prime time. Let me know, and we'll share this widely. It's interesting when you see artists that are in a different level, that are already established, and what kind of struggles they have, right? That is to try to find time to do other kinds of creative things. But it's cool that you get to spend time with well, the characters you grew up with, that I grew up with. Do you read any comic books that come out from like different artists? How do you keep in tune with everything that is going on Marvel wise?
Well, the sad part is that I don't have time.
Right. Yeah.
I read comics my whole life. I have a big collection of comics. I know everything from comics from 80s below.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays it's impossible for me to have time to it. That's very sad, but and I have to choose. I have to use my spare time to absorb another culture and another media like books or movies or series or anything, or if I keep reading comics and the same comics I work with.
Right.
I don't think I'm gonna grow if I use this very little time I have to read the same thing I'm producing.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure.
I think I'll be a better artist if I absorb another stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I read comics once in a while, but not superhero for the same reason. I prefer to read things like Saga from. I prefer trade paperbacks, everything collected. But again, I love comics. I love superheroes,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to make this tough choice. If I keep digesting the same thing I'm producing, I'm not gonna grow. So I have
For sure. And I think
to use. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it shows a lot of like all your other influences, sometimes from movies or from like other kinds of art that you like. I urge people to go online, take a look at Mike's artwork in case you're not familiar with it, because what I like about it, at least how I find it interesting, is that you are at the same time very realistic but stylized. So there is elements of larger than life characteristics, and at the same time you have like some ultra gritty, very like detailed work. Can you talk a little bit about your style and how you like to draw?
My biggest influence in comics is Neil Adams. Everybody knows him, and I read once in a Twitter of his son. I think it was Josh Adams. He said that when my dad wanted to teach me how to draw realistic and with dynamism, he told me to study Mike Deodato's
Mm.
work. So I was so happy, so proud of the. Oh man, Neil, Neil Adams could have said, "Ah, study me," but he said he studied Mike Deodato. I think that's the main thing. My work is realistic, but at the same time is very dynamic.
Hmm.
And the reason is because I have lots of influences. Because my dad loved comics, and because in Brazil we have comics from all over the world. Spain, a lot of artists from France, and not only America comics. So I could learn from several styles, Filipino, and a lot of very great artists. And I put them all in the mix, and
Yeah, that's cool.
I keep learning. Every time I see a good artist doing something I like, I try to learn from his work. I study his work. I try to discover what makes him click. It's fascinating. Comics is there is always something you want to learn. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting how this like self-taught approach to drawing like probably helped create the style that you have, and how getting the like inspired and influence from other artists, especially like all this artists from all over the world that have their own different influences, help get yours richer. And I remember like when I was growing up, like it was mainly American comic books that went at least to the city that I went to. I don't remember in the 80s and 90s seeing that much stuff from other countries. How do you find like the comic book industry has changed over time? Like I know it's a broad question, but like comparing to how you grew up reading comic books, how do you see people today reading them, or at least the people that read your comic books?
well, I think we lost a lot of readers for other media like movies and video games, and I think we are getting them back now, mainly because of the movies. It's like they are bringing them back, and there is a whole new generation of people interested on comics now. I don't know. I think we have been. I'm talking especially about American comics. That's the market I work with.
Mm-hmm.
We have been in a much worse place in the past. It's been years trying to rebuild our readership base, and I think it's paying off now. Sales fall a little bit here and there, but I think we are in a way of to recover.
No, that's great. I live in Canada now, so but comparing to even Brazil, I used to go to my local newsstand. They would have basically every week or every month, they would have the new collections of comic books, and that sort of went away. Right now, you have to go into a specialized store. You have to go into a like a proper like comic book store. So maybe that took away a little bit of the discoverability because it was so widespread. You could go anywhere and find comic books. And now if you want to find, you have to go in, and there is that overwhelming amount of comic books. How do you feel about that?
In the 90s, a lot of mistakes were made. Marvel bought its own distributor, and there were three distributors, and I think DC made a deal with the second one. In the third, it went bankrupt because the two big companies were had their own distributor. and then Marvel didn't know how to operate the distribution. I read that 50% of the comic book shops weren't getting comics, so they went belly up too. So a lot of mistakes were made back then that almost killed the market. So we are recovering from that. But on the other side, we have internet nowadays. We have Amazon. There is so much ways for you to get your comic delivered at your home. I think one thing made up for another. So let's see what's happened.
Cool. And do you like to read comics like on tablets or on the computer, or for you it's still the paper is the way to that is supposed to be, or how do you feel about that?
I like I like comics on paper because of the smell. I like to smell
Hmm.
the
Me
printing.
too.
But on the other hand, I read the whole saga collection on iPad,
Hmm.
and I thought it was great. The colors were vivid, and I love the experience to read on my bedroom
Hmm.
without have to turn the light on, and it was so quick for me to get them digitally,
Hmm.
and I love the experience too. I like to read novels in my iPhone. The thing is, comics are not only to read. A lot of people like to collect them, like they collect coins or stamps.
Hmm.
It's not like just music that you just buy the records. People like to invest in comics, so they know that in the future it can you can pay for the college of yours.
Right. Yeah.
So it's different. But I like reading them on an iPad. I like the colors. I think it's nice.
Hmm. Cool. And then one other thing I wanted to ask you, because I know that since you have to draw so much, I know that you do take care of your health. You're always like exercising. And I know that you practice karate, right?
Yeah,
So can you talk a little bit about the way since you have to sit down and draw for long periods of time, how do you deal with your health, your posture? Because I remember when I met you, you had such great posture. So how do you deal with that the health thing?
yeah. I started doing karate when I was 15 because of bullying in school,
Huh.
and then I went to watch a movie called The Trail of Bruce Lee. It was not Bruce Lee,
Uh-huh.
but anyway,
I know. Yeah, it's one of those copycat
yeah.
ones afterwards. Yes.
And then wow, I want this, and it was fantastic because it gave me focus. It was fun, of course. I learned that I don't have to beat people, and made me more calm and more controlled. I know if I fight somebody, it's a risk for the people. So it made me more controlled, more calmer person, and gave me focus. It's the most impressive thing about martial art in general, but in karate is the concentration. It's it's not like any other fight like boxing or anything. There is this thing about the focus, the concentration that made the whole difference. And I use it for my career in comics too. All the things I learn on fighting, I have to pay attention to what's going on in the market. So to have this general vision of everything that's going on. So although I don't read much comics, but I know everything that is being published and what's hot, what everything is doing. And these are things that you use in a fight too. You pay attention to the whole thing, not only the adversary in front of you. And in the more practical way, I do stretching all day before going to bed. I stretch myself. It's great, man. I recommend karate to everybody.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah. I knew about the advantages of having like good health and good posture, but I haven't thought of karate as a way approach and engage the marketplace and the world in a more general way. But of course, it makes total sense. Cool. So then, one other thing that I wanted to ask you, like before we finish off, is for people that are interested in becoming, say, a comic book artist and are into that, what would be your recommendation in the world today to learn and to put their work out there? How does that work today, you think?
I think you don't have to wait to be discovered or I want to start working at the big two companies or no. I think you have to do your own comic. Eventually, you're gonna be discovered or not. But if you don't wait, there is so many ways for you to publish your work nowadays. Can do the Kickstarter, and you don't have to depend on a editor to publish your work. You can present it for your fan base, and oh, do you want to buy this? You want to fund me? And then you publish your own work, and you are gonna learn a lot by doing independent comic. And that's the thing that people at the big two they tell them to do. Do your own work because they will pay attention to that. And I think that's the way. Don't waste your time doing samples for companies. Do your comic. Eventually, something's gonna happen.
Hmm. With your own vision and your own creation and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And then one other thing that I wanted to ask you is that just came to my mind. Like now with Marvel being not only like owned by Disney, and then with all these movies that are coming out, how does the aesthetics in the movie influenced the comic book world? Is that something that you guys have guidelines or have to think about, or you are free to draw characters any way you want?
At least for me, I never had anything like, "Oh, do this because of the movie," or "This follow this thing they are doing in the movie." Never ever. Actually, I think it's the other way around. Movies follow what we do in comics, but I never got anything like that from an editor. I actually got the other way. I was going to do a cover for Agents of Shield, and the editor specifically said for not to use the same face of the main actor.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
Make it asked me to make it a little bit different, and
Hmm.
then okay. uh, the only time they asked me to do it exactly like the movies and following the likenesses of the actors is when I do Star Wars.
Hmm.
They want it to look exactly like the movie. So, but from Marvel in general, no, they never asked me to do anything based on movies.
Cool. When I was following like comic books more closely before, I remember then, oh, like this idea in specific movie or TV series was taken out of or a specific aesthetic or angle of camera was taken from specific comic book pages that I remember reading. So that's really cool to hear that they're not smartly interfering with the creative process of the artists.
Yeah, I think it will happen organically. Naturally, one will influence the other. We like the movies, and then I want the character to look more like the actor or not. But there is no memos being distributed. Oh, do like this, or
Hmm.
at least not for me.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, and then one final thing I wanted to ask you because it's when we talked many, many, many years ago when I was basically, this is on a personal note, so I was finishing my master's here in, and then it was in art, media, and design, and then I was considering getting into photography, but then I thought it's such an overwhelming field and it's so difficult and so many great artists working, and who am I being 30 something guy going into photography. And I remember you mentioned something about this myth of being too old or too young. So can you talk a little bit about that approach that you have, like of go getting it? And I remember it was very inspiring for me. I just thought it would be cool for people to hear about that.
Yeah, Yeah, I didn't remember that anymore, but I know that Al Foster, the creator of Prince Valiant, that's a huge success in the whole world. He created it with when he was 40. I know that Jack Kirby started drawing Fantastic Four. I think he was 40 something too. So this guy has our geniuses. So I don't think age is a actually it's an advantage, I guess, because you are smarter, you are in a better. I don't know. Yeah. I think so. Actually, it's a very good advantage
Hmm.
to start older.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, like yeah, thanks for telling us that. I just wanted to put that little plug out there because you never know when people are going to inspire, and it's something that I remember you said this during one of the comment. Like I don't know, you're talking to either my like a common friend, and then you were just mentioning that like totally out of hand. It's like, oh wow, that's actually true. Like, why would you like worry about that? And then now, Mike, if people want to go check your art and see your artwork and everything, where should they go?
I have Tumblr, I have Instagram, I have Facebook, I have Twitter, I have everything. You just go look for Mike Deodato. I'll be there, and I always respond to everybody, unless I don't see the message. But when I see, I respond. So talk to me.
No, that's great. So, with that, Mike, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your own independent comic book coming soon.
Okay, thank you. I hope to finish till October, I guess.
Oh, cool! Exciting, awesome. So, Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, that's it for today's show. Thank you for listening to the Wanderings podcast. You can find show notes and links at pedrobonato.com/podcast. If you like the show, I would love if you could share it with your friends or leave a review on iTunes. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on all social media at Pedro Bonatto. I would love to hear from you. You can find my photography work at pedrobonato.com. The music for the Wanderings podcast is provided by the Blue Dot Ensemble, a music and dance group exploring traditions from all over the planet, where I am one of the founders and the lead drummer. You can find us at bluedotensemble.com. So tune in next week for another show. Until then, I urge you to keep following your curiosity, and I'm looking forward to our next Wanderings together.